Well, welcome back to the In Good Company podcast, where we believe that the best parts in business happen in good company. And I am in fantastic company today with someone who I absolutely look up to. The way that you not only have pursued your career and the thing that God has put you on this planet to pursue, but you've invited your family along on the journey and truly cared for them in the process. Very much admire you. I know we spoke a little bit before the episode, but you guys, you do not want to miss this episode. I do not say that often. Nicole Doyley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Mike. And back at you, everything you just said.
Yeah, appreciate it.
It's such a pleasure knowing you, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for those that don't know your story, maybe just give us a little bit of a rundown. Where'd you grow up? How'd you get to Rochester? Like, talk about the journey.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so slightly bigger than Rochester.
Just a touch.
Just a touch. And I grew up there, a wonderful place to grow up, and then went to Dartmouth College, which is in New Hampshire. And then I was there for 20 years on full-time staff doing ministry there after I graduated, which is an odd thing. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And then I met my husband there, and he was on the faculty at Dartmouth, and I met him there. And then he got a job offer at the U of R, University of Rochester. So that brought us here about 18 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Multiple lives in one, wrapped up. That's
Indeed,
awesome.
Indeed.
Do you go back and visit? Do you have family in Brooklyn area still, or?
I don't have any family in Brooklyn. So Marvin is from Jamaica. So that's pretty much where we try to go there every other year so that our boys can know their Jamaican roots.
I love it.
And know that extended family and understand what they're saying through the thick accents and love the culture. So
yeah.
that tends to be where we go when we visit family.
I took one of my first, I don't know if I ever told you this, I took one of my first like missions trips to Riverton, Kingston, Jamaica area.
Okay.
And I just met some students from the local college there, the University of the West Indies,
yes,
I think it was.
Yeah.
And they just taught me how to little handshakes, wagwan, brother, and like all the stuff. And I was like, I'm the coolest guy. And then anyway, but then my wife and I, we took our honeymoon down to Jamaica, and we experienced the other part of Jamaica,
right,
which was,
part.
yeah. So I was like, wait, this is different.
This is not as cool.
I know. Yeah. But absolutely huge fan of their people. I mean, it was so amazing to experience that.
Yeah.
So talk about, what do you do now? Obviously we got some big news, and I'm excited to talk about with the book that you just wrote, but what's new in the world of Nicole Doyley today?
Well, I was on staff at the Father's House with you, Mike. That's how we met. And I resigned from there in the beginning of 2020, not knowing that a pandemic was about to hit. But I resigned from there to write a book. I knew I had self-published 3 other books, which is no small feat, and kudos to anybody who does it. But I knew that the world of traditional publishing, which is what I wanted to try, was going to be an uphill battle. I didn't know it at the time, but I came to know that 98% of book proposals wind up in the trash.
Whoa.
So only 2% of book proposals actually make it to being published. And the statistics are even more dire if you are a person of color, to have your stories told. So anyway, I knew that it was going to be an uphill battle, so I resigned to do that, and then the pandemic hit, and my kids were at home, and I needed to figure out how to homeschool.
Whoa.
And so I started a podcast because I could do that while they were doing their, figure. So I started a podcast called Let's Talk Conversations on Race.
Yeah.
And then in 2021, I started the uphill climb to writing my book and getting it published. So, and it's just been released last month.
It's amazing. Yeah. I am excited to get my hands on a copy, number
thanks.
one. I think I've always been fascinated with this conversation, especially as a white man. Mm-hmm. We were in an incredibly multicultural church where even I think 40-50% of the students that were coming to the youth group at the time were minorities in terms of the students that were coming. So there was this window of even my journey where it was like, I don't just want to talk about things and not actually understand them. Where do you think, for maybe a white listener or someone who would read your book, is there a portion of the book that would be helpful for them that maybe don't have that day-to-day experience, let's say? Yeah,
totally. I say unabashedly that everybody should read my book.
Yeah, well, yeah.
No, but I mean, obviously I'm going to say that, but I really mean it.
Yeah.
So it's called What About the Children? 5 values for multiracial families. But I really truly believe it's not just for multiracial families, because it's talking about intentionality in our parenting and intentionality specific about racial identity. But even for white families where maybe racial identity isn't so upfront in their face, it's so important for white families to teach their kids the beauty of having a diverse community and what different groups have gone through and overcome and persevered through, and the beauty that different people bring, and that they shouldn't be satisfied sort of living in a homogeneous world. And so I think that the 5 values for multiracial families, they're values for every family, that every family needs that. So, and just, hopefully even white families will encourage their kids to have diverse friends, and when the kids are little, having play dates with children of color, and doing that intelligently, and teaching their children to be culturally literate. So cultural literacy is really important. I remember, I'm going to name drop a couple of people that our audience may not know, but I remember being very close with Dennis Johnson, Robbie Tyler, some of the pastors at the time with me. And we were getting our master's in theology, me and Robbie specifically. We would do these week-long intensives down in Philadelphia. And we were down there right around really when I felt like some of the conversation on race was getting a lot more mainstream attention with George Floyd and some of these other things that were traumatically happening in the face of America and the world. And I remember in my ignorance just looking at Pastor Robbie at the time and saying, well, dude, I grew up in Virginia. Like, my best friends were Black. I mean, I would have sleepovers at their house. Literally, Nicole, the first church experience of my life, my best friend growing up, his name's Marcus, beautiful Black family, great family. I wanted to spend the night at his house on Saturday night. And his mom goes, listen, honey, the only way you can spend the night at our house on Saturday is if you come to church with us on Sunday. Wow. My first church experience, all Black church. Was that a Black church? Like full blown, like energy's great. Awesome. Like, and I'm just like this little white kid, like, all right. And I loved it. And this woman preached on the fiery furnace, and like she preached this incredible message. And I just remember walking away going like, she had a standard for her home. And of course kids can come and, feel safe here, but like, this is what we do on Sunday. And I just remember talking with Robbie, and really, I had a safe space as an ignorant white person at the time to actually talk about and really get to know how he was processing the same news that I was trying to process. And so I can personally attest to what you're saying about continuing to want to really be curious, be open. Don't just think that you've got someone pegged or figured out, but really take the time to get to know these people. Yes. What would you say is another maybe good piece of advice for someone who maybe doesn't have kids yet, but maybe they can find some resources in your book that could be helpful when it comes to having some of these conversations? Advice for people who have multiracial families, or
or even really just anybody. I think just when it comes to the topic of race or any of these things. I think
so much. Firstly, so for white families, it's a lot has been written about the fact that in general, white people don't feel like they're missing anything if they don't have people of color in their lives. That you sort of could go on in life and work with all white people, and your kids could go to school with all white people and be perfectly content with that. And yet, so encouraging white people to not be content with that everybody brings something to the table, and it's sort of like if you went to a buffet and you only ate the broccoli, or you only ate one kind of food, you're missing out on so much. And I've told this story before, but I can't imagine my parenting journey without one of my closest friends, Blessing Agbona, who's Nigerian. So she brings her Nigerian-ness to our friendship, and I've gleaned so much about being a mother, a parent from her culture, because I don't like everything that I see in American parenting. Yeah. And so I've grown having her in my life as a parent. So in the same way, to not be content having a homogeneous life. And secondly, kids are not colorblind. So from a very early age, of course, the first thing you teach your kid is this is pink, this is red, this is blue.
Yeah.
You know, kids see color and they also see difference.
Yeah.
One of my sons, when he was 3, went to his first birthday party, and we knew he would be the only Black kid because he was going to an all-white preschool. And, you know, the first game was going to be Duck, Duck, Goose.
Yeah.
So they sat about 10 squirmy 3-year-olds in a circle to play Duck, Duck, Goose. And I was standing there watching, and I noticed that every kid, as they were going duck, 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 duck around the circle, passed over my son's head. Every kid did that. So every kid got tapped goose and got to run around the circle except my son. And I don't think those parents sat their 3-year-olds down and said, now Johnny, don't touch that little brown boy's head. They didn't do that. But those kids saw that my son was different.
Wow.
And they each came to the conclusion that they should avoid touching different. And so kids see color. And so for white parents to sit down with a picture book with their little ones and picking up picture books with all different kinds of kids and saying, isn't she beautiful? Isn't he beautiful? And can't you imagine being their friend? What do you think? What do you think it'd be like being that little boy's friend? And imagining that, and then also recognizing that. Sorry, there's so much, but 2 other things. One is that kids very early on see disparity and come to conclusions. So kids, okay, all of my teachers are white, and my pediatrician is white, and everybody in authority in my life is white, but then the lunch lady is Black.
Wow.
And so they, of course they don't articulate it, but they see this sort of this pyramid of this power dynamic. And so in their subconscious, it's like, okay, white people are more important than Black and brown people. And so for parents to realize that is happening in their children's head, and to disrupt that, to put them in a place where they see a Black person in a place of authority, where their soccer coach is going to be Black instead of white. But it takes intentionality. And they also see disparity. Okay, we're driving around the suburbs and it's so beautiful and all the lawns are perfect and everybody's white. And then when we go through certain parts of the city and mom acts kind of nervous when she's driving and everybody's Black, and that is going in on a subconscious level too. Yeah. So if you don't want to inadvertently pass racism to your kids, find out, okay, why? Why are the suburbs mostly white? Why is the inner city mostly Black and brown? Is it because there's something wrong with Black and brown people, or are there other reasons? And then teaching your kids those reasons.
Man. I remember, and I don't mean to keep throwing Robbie Tyler under the bus. Robbie, if you're listening, I love you. He made a comment where he said, I think that, you know, there is like inherent racism is born in you. Mm-hmm. And I got really upset.
You're right.
Like I'm not kidding, to the point of tears of like, and that's when I shared the story of I grew up with my best friends and this and that. And he wasn't pointing anger or something at me, but I, through working with mentors like Eric Rogers and some other people in my life, I just needed a posture of openness. And he's not directing something at me. He's sharing out of his place of experience, and I can absorb that information. And I can't feel what that would have felt like to have your son skipped over. That is something I've never felt. So when you share that story, I'm sitting, like I'm getting goosebumps, like holding back tears literally as you're sharing the story, because I have a 2-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. And between you and I, if something like that were to happen, I think my wife would have probably jumped over the fence and, you know, shoved the kids herself, you know?
Right.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Because it helps me, it helps listeners that maybe haven't had that experience to really, again, learn from that and to grow from that. And I think, you know, we have to be better. I think the country has to be better. Our world has to be better. I think, we and again, I don't want to make this about me. We have so many great friends and aunts and uncles and people that we call aunts and uncles that we do have some of these newer books and the Disney princesses and like some of these things that there really have, from my perspective, there have been moments of progress and kind of seeing some of these things happen. And my daughter, she, there's a book we have called You Are Enough, and it's this beautiful black girl with a big head of hair at the front of the book. And almost every girl in the pages is a different nationality.
That's beautiful.
And it's a really incredible book, and it's one of our favorites. And we read it every night, and we're laughing together. But you can see from those real life examples you just shared of the actual core, like spiritual soul impact that's having on her, which is really special.
Yeah, and envisioning being their friend. And just to say, what, I don't think white people are genetically wired to be racist, but I think, as a Christian, I'll say I think we're all equally sinful.
Right.
But I do think that white people have to recognize that in the West, white people have been in a position of power for centuries, and that breeds certain things, like all the teachers are white and most of the doctors are white. And so that creates a reality. And if we don't want our kids to feel superior or inferior, we have to do the work and be very intentional.
Yeah. How can we do the work?
I think it's partly what I just said. So, and I'll tell another story. So I was watching a police series with one of my sons as a teenager, not when he was 3, a police series. And after about 6 or 7 episodes, I said to him, so what color are the bad guys usually? And he was like, black or Hispanic, black or brown. And I said, yeah. And I said, what crime are they usually committing? Oh, they're usually drug dealers and, And I said, yeah. And I said, do you know that white people use and sell drugs at the same rate as black people? And actually, numerically speaking, they sell them more because there are more of them.
Yep.
And he was like, really? And he just couldn't believe it because Hollywood is pumping out. It's called cultural racism, that it's in our culture, in Hollywood, in the media, in what we see. It's continuously pumping out. White people are better. White culture is better. White people are more intelligent, more moral, less criminally minded, more beautiful. Who's usually the love interest in these movies? It's either somebody white or somebody very light skinned. Usually not a beautiful dark skinned woman. So for parents to be aware of that this is to watch shows and to see, wow. And I noticed in another show, like, okay, when it is a white guy who's the bad guy, you usually feel sorry for him because maybe he shot somebody because that person shot his wife, or you feel empathy even though he did a bad thing.
Wow.
Whereas the black or Hispanic person is just an evil, wicked person. So to be aware of things like that, I also had a conversation with my sons one day around the dinner table. I said, do you know that most poor people in this country are white? And they were like, what? And I said, yeah, numerically speaking, there are more poor white people than poor black people. It's just that poor white people tend to live in rural communities where they're sort of spread out.
Right.
We've seen them driving on some trip and we're like, we're not going to stop in that town to go to the bathroom. So they're spread out. And when things are spread out, they're not as obvious. And also there aren't a lot of movies. There's tons of movies and TV shows about the inner city.
For sure.
Where that's in your face, inner city crime. But not a lot where it's showing white poverty. So I think parents have to not be afraid to look at reality and to find out why that reality exists and then teach that to their kids.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot there. And I think, again, whether it's your book, I know you have an incredible blog as well of just great resources, I think, for people to learn and to grow. I mean, I think there is this, I'm 36 now. I'm already experiencing this. There is this thing that happens in life where you start to, you're in high school and you learn a subject and you get a grade, and then you go to college and there's these assessment blocks. How am I doing? And there's progress. And then you get dumped into the real world, and there's really no more assessments. There's really no check-ins. How am I doing? Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I evolving? And I'm 36 now. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. But the posture of learning, the posture of being a student and not making final decisions about a topic that you think you know, but actually being open and being willing to grow. I'm already encouraged, 20 minutes into this thing, just chatting with you. And again, for those listening, those that are watching, I would implore you to read a blog post on your site, because again, you're making a difference, and I'm really grateful.
Thank you. Could I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Along those lines, another conversation I had with my sons. White people, the average white person has 10 times more wealth than the average black person. And I don't mean wealth by like the average white person has millions of dollars in the bank, because we know that's not true.
Yeah.
But wealth in terms of property, what they might inherit when their parents pass away. So I said that to my boys. The average white person has 10 times more wealth than the average black person. And then we started to dissect why. And I said, well, first I said, either that's a fact. So either white people really are better, they work harder, they make better decisions, they're more disciplined, or something has systematically happened that has barred black people from opportunity.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. Either white supremacy is true or systemic racism is true. There's no other. It's a genetic reason why white people have more wealth, they're just better, or there's a systemic reason, like why haven't black people done better? So I think to look at, it's very simple. And if you don't believe in white supremacy, that white people really just make better decisions, if you don't believe in white supremacy, then find out, okay, well, what is systemic racism? Let me not be afraid of that. Let me not be afraid of that. Is that CRT? Let me not be afraid of. Let me look into that and find out.
My brain is like trying to derail myself from the list of questions that I gave, because I am so incredibly interested in this. So let's just get rid of the questions. I'm just gonna stay in this, because I am not trying to shame anybody or even claim that I'm doing a perfect job at this. Like, I've had a lot of experiences and conversations with my friends that I've apologized afterwards with, right? Of just really learning. Okay, I'm gonna share the story, and if I got to cut it out, I got to cut it out. So, there was a conversation that I was a part of with a bunch of white men in a boardroom years ago. Jokes being tossed around and words being used that are beyond inappropriate, that could potentially derail an entire business. And I remember sharing this with one of my mentors, who is a black man, and he made a comment to me that has forever changed my perspective, where he said, you will be in rooms that I am not in, or my people are not in. And from how do we do the work was one of the questions I asked you. He really challenged me and said, you can speak up in those moments, and you can have the courage to do that. Now, I'm telling you, Nicole, I wish I was perfect at that.
Right.
Like,
none of us is.
I wish I could look at you and say, every time I'm a champion, But it does, for those listening, it does take courage. Even though something is adamantly wrong when it comes to race or anything, it does take courage to go to a superior and say, hey, that's not appropriate.
Right.
Like, that is not something that I feel comfortable with you doing, and I don't think you should do that. So anyway,
that's good. And I think, we're in Rochester, and I imagine you have listeners outside of Rochester, but, Rochester, New York, is the 6th poorest city in the nation. And a lot of that poverty is black and brown, although like I said before, when you get out to more rural, it turns white. And there is not a large Black middle class. There's not a large professional Black population. We exist, but it's not like Atlanta, which is full of Black millionaires.
Yeah.
It's not like Washington, D.C. even, or Houston, or even New York City, where if you wind up in the ER, you're likely to see a Black person in scrubs.
Sure.
Because they have a medical degree, not because they're delivering food, you know?
Right.
So you're not likely to see that in Rochester, but to recognize that the world is bigger than Rochester, that there is a large Black middle class in the nation, and to avail ourselves of opportunities to meet those people and hang out with them and introduce our kids to them.
Yeah, and I remember growing up in a suburb of D.C. in Virginia. Some of my best friends, like I said, were working in the political space. I mean, they were commuting back and forth from D.C. And then I went to St. John Fisher College in Pittsford, New York. And I remember going like, there's a ton of freaking white people here. Like that was literally my first thought. And if I think about my experience of, thank God I was able to experience what I experienced living somewhere else and all those things. But for someone that has grown up in Victor or Pittsford or, you know, in some community, and then they go through the system and that's their life experience. I mean, that's a different deal.
Yep. And all they know about Black people is what they see on the news,
Sure.
the neighborhoods they don't drive through, what they see in movies and such. Then this is how, you know, people are always so shocked when something racist happens. How could this be happening in 2025? Right. Well, if it's not disrupted, then it will continue to happen. And I think that really the onus is on parents. It's actually, I get frustrated with how little is taught in school, but when the rubber hits the road, the onus isn't even on schools. It's really on parents.
Yeah.
I wish public schools did more, but as a parent, I don't depend on the public schools to make sure that my kids are reading Black authors and learning about famous Black people.
Yeah. You're a very impressive person, Nicole.
Well,
thank you. Thank you for just entertaining me with your knowledge today. Even if we get 2 listeners today, this has been worth its weight in gold. We have a segment that we do on our podcast called Fails of the Week. It's very easy for someone to look at your website. You're an author. Life must be so easy and you're just doing your thing. Do you have any funny stories of some fails? This could be in the parenting arm. It could be in the book writing process, but anything funny kind of worth sharing that maybe give some encouragement to the young entrepreneurs out there that seem to be failing every week like me. Any fun stories of some fails?
I don't really, I can't think of anything funny, but I can certainly think of some fails. So one parenting fail is I was lecturing one of my sons about some not great grades that he got. He didn't fail, but he didn't get great grades at the end of a marking period at school. And sort of lecturing him about, you know, he's in high school, this matters for college, and, you know, just sort of like kind of laying it on thick that, you know, you got to get your GPA up, you know, all that stuff. And then I found out he was already feeling badly about his grades. So I could have had that conversation, maybe still had it like, okay, let's try to get those grades up. This matters, but done it in a more gentle way. And maybe took a minute and heard that he really wasn't feeling great about his grades. And then finesse the conversation with a little bit more grace.
Yeah.
And then professionally wise, I think, you know, my first book was also about race, and it was self-published. And somebody who read it for me, sort of a beta reader, said, it's great, but it's really full of a lot of facts and figures, and you need more stories. And at the time, I'm like, and he was talking specific personal stories. And I was much younger, and I just couldn't access within myself personal stories. And sure enough, when I read that book now, I'm like, okay, this is way too boring. I mean, it's just
you're so like, is this Wikipedia? What,
exactly. It's not. Your book is not supposed to be Wikipedia. Yeah. And so now this last book that I wrote, you know, is full of stories, and I think partly because of what I should have listened to 20 years ago. Yeah. You know, I finally was able, you know, to bring a lot of personal elements into it. Because it's really stories that change people. We're so inundated. Like you said, Wikipedia, we could look in Google and find facts and figures and statistics. And
Yeah.
we're hearing numbers every day.
Yeah.
200,000 people, blah, blah, blah. This many people died, in an earthquake. We're just so inundated with numbers that in order to move on with life and function, we have to be a little callous.
Yeah.
Because if we took it all in, we'd go crazy.
Yeah, empathy overload or something would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really got to be stories.
Yeah. I'm happy you brought that up though about the two different versions of your book, because I know there are many entrepreneurs that they are not willing to try something new because they already failed. So I failed the first time. I already tried that. I'm not going to move forward with this. When we first had our kid in 2020, I bought some camera equipment, some lights, and I created Dad Pod, which was like Dad Bod,
right?
But podcast. And I was like, I have this brilliant idea. I'm going to document my son's life. Took a YouTube class. I mean, I was ready to go. It failed miserably because it turns out, Nicole, raising a kid is very difficult. So I had this big plan. I'm like, I got this. And then my wife's like, are you still editing videos that 10 people are watching? Because we got, a poopy diaper down here.
Right.
But nothing is wasted.
That's so true.
I learned how to edit stuff. I learned what equipment, worked and what lighting was good. And I learned how to build a YouTube channel and account and all these things. Then when I started a business and now that we have the content house, I'm actually putting to practice the things that I failed at in that previous venture.
100%.
And
so good.
I'm even more excited for the future blogs and the future books. And again, the things that you have in you that certainly we've had a glimpse at today. But for someone listening that maybe they feel in like this analysis paralysis season of their life, maybe they feel like stuck in a 9-to-5 that they don't like, or maybe when you're speaking, maybe it's evoking something in them where they're like, man, I would love to kind of join this mission. And I feel like I could do something like this. What words of wisdom might you have for someone that's just kind of on the fence, but not able to make that jump?
I think start small. So when I started writing so many years ago, writing my self-published books, I was working a full-time job, and some of the time I was single, and then I got married, and then I wasn't single, but I was always busy. And so I just started writing 2 hours a week. I took an evening that was free. I think it was Tuesday nights, and from maybe 5 to 7 would just be my writing time. And so I think it really is start small.
Yeah.
And don't feel like you have to, and figure out when your brain is firing the most. My brain really wasn't firing the most at 5 p.m. It probably would have been better at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
But I was at work, so I couldn't do 8 a.m. So I knew I couldn't wait until it was too late in the evening. So so I grabbed that time. And then secondly, I think part of the analysis paralysis is because of social media. Because, when I started the journey of finding an agent, I knew that at the time I didn't have a huge platform, and I kept seeing on social media people who had 1 million followers or 100,000 followers. And I didn't have that. And that's part of the recipe for finding an agent, is having 100,000 followers. And, but I had a little bit of audacity. Like, I think I have a great concept and I'm just going to look for an agent anyway. And then when I found an agent and she then had to find a publisher, again, she's like, I know she doesn't have 100,000 followers, but I think this is a great concept and I think you should publish her book. So I think just knowing when to turn off the statistics. I didn't get married till I turned 40. So, and all that time in my 20s and 30s, I wanted to be married. And so after a while, I had to not go to the statistics. The chances of getting married after you're 40 there's better chance of, going to Mars than getting married after you're 40 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's like, I just couldn't read that anymore.
Yeah.
Because it was too discouraging. So in the same way, trying to start your own business when you don't have a lot of money, or you can't find, whatever the barriers are, just tuning that out and doing what you can do
Yeah.
to start small.
Yeah, use what's in your hand,
Yes.
you know, and
Yes.
and that could be, if you have a story to tell, then get your iPhone out and record yourself telling it,
Yes.
right? Or wherever you find yourself. I think that's absolutely valuable.
Yeah.
So regarding the book, is there anything, maybe a chapter or a segment or just like a guiding principle that kind of find its way throughout? What is one thing you hope people take away?
I think it's that I think a lot of parents sort of jump in, hold their nose, jump in the deep end and hope for the best. And they think that, well, as long as I love my child, that'll be enough. And love is not enough. I won't give away my age, but I've lived
27, but
yes, 27.
Sorry,
Exactly.
I didn't mean to. Sorry.
Several decades. And so the struggles that I had growing up biracial, you would think, well, surely things have changed by now. And yet they really haven't. And I think it's because people in interracial relationships or people who adopt transracially, perhaps, they keep thinking, well, love will be enough. And it's still not enough. That you're bringing this child into the world who is different, quote unquote, and they will struggle unless you dig in and figure out how to help them to love the skin that they're wrapped in, and to love every part of their heritage. So I think for any parent, love is not enough. We live in a complex world. And we have to educate ourselves to disrupt things, to make sure we don't pass on negative things.
Yeah.
I think parents sort of know this, like perhaps if you struggled with alcohol, maybe you don't have alcohol in the house.
Yep.
So I think parents sort of understand it on that level. Or if you grew up seeing an unhappy marriage and you learned, okay, I'm not going to do that when I get married. So we sort of understand it, but I don't think we understand it in terms of some other things, like identity.
There's so much. Every time you finish speaking, there's just my brain just continues to rattle through these things. But again, I gotta let me ask it this way.
Yeah.
If there is a business owner that's listening that is hearing what you're saying and says, man, I'd love for her to share this with my staff or my team, what are some ways that people can work with Nicole Doyley, or is speaking a part of what you do? Like maybe share some ways that people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, I mean, NicoleDoyley.com. And Doyley is Doyley, so NicoleDoyley.com. There's a contact form, and I talk all the time about not just multiracial families, but just I've done a little bit of consulting with organizations in terms of just I know DEI is a dirty word these days, but
geez. Yeah.
but it's still important.
Yeah.
About if you rightly recognize that the more different kinds of people you have around the table, the more robust your business is going to be and the more successful your business is going to be. So how do you do that? How do you retain people? Or whatever it is, schools just talking about, okay, there's three black kids in each class and everybody else is white. How do we teach history without making those three black kids really uncomfortable?
Yeah.
How do we talk about slavery without making them feel uncomfortable? So, I've spoken at churches, schools, organizations, just about all things race.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for the audience, but I have gotten so much out of this personally, and I'm just very grateful for you, your family.
Thank you.
We have a part of our podcast that we save for the end called the Rapid Fire Hot Seat Questions.
Okay.
So these are 1 to 2 word, quick hit answers.
Okay.
Let's dive in. Dream travel destination that you have never been to?
The Seychelles, which if you don't know, those are a bunch of islands off the east coast of Africa.
How about it?
Yeah, and I've seen pictures, just incredible.
Say it again.
Seychelles.
Seychelles.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite childhood book?
I would say The Day Clifford Was Hatched.
Wow.
No, Fletcher. The Day Fletcher Was Hatched.
Fletcher.
It's about a big sloppy dog who thought he was a chicken.
I love it. All right. And are you an early bird or a night owl?
Neither. My preference would be maybe to sleep until 7 and get to work at 9, but definitely more morning than night. My brain definitely is not doing anything impressive
Yeah.
after 8. 7 or 8 p.m.
And then what about kind of how you consume your info? Is there a good podcast or a good book that you've read lately that has really been a nice encouragement to you, or maybe a challenge to you?
I tend to read nonfiction unless I'm on vacation, and then I read spy thrillers.
I love it.
Tom Clancy type things.
Yeah.
I recently read Cast, and I can't even remember. I recently read it, but I can't remember
That's okay.
the author's name. But it was about different, very heavy, about the different caste systems. We think of caste in terms of India, the caste system in India, but America has had a caste system, Europe. So caste was really, really great. I like to learn.
Yeah.
And since all things race is my deal, I'm usually learning about that.
I love it. Yeah. It's awesome. And it comes through in the way that you speak, right? I mean, you're absorbing that information. What would you say is one word that your kids would use to describe you as mom?
Gosh, maybe intense.
Nice. That would be so fun if they were here. They're like, intense.
I sit down at the dinner table. I'm like, I got to teach you something today. And I'll teach them the latest thing I heard on a podcast or the latest thing I read in an article or something.
I love it. I love it.
And they roll their eyes, but then they're like, what, Mom?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then, you know what? When they hit like mid-20s, they're going to be calling you every day going like, hey, what was that one thing?
Yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah. You know they will.
Yeah.
Are you more likely to cry during a movie or laugh until you can't breathe / cry?
Probably cry.
Yeah.
Probably cry. Yeah. Especially the older I get. Yeah.
Yeah. I also cry. Yeah. I can't help myself for some reason. My wife makes fun of me because I cannot get through American Idol auditions. I am so serious. I don't know what it is. It's like a young kid that is like pursuing their dream and then they get the golden ticket and it's like, I just can't. Yeah. I'm like, wow. So anyway, she's like, she'll walk into the bedroom. Are you watching American Idol again? I'm like, all right, got it. Yeah. So anyway, that's my awesome. Crying. Last question. This is my all-time favorite question. What are you most proud of?
Wow. Well, lately, of course, it's my book. I mean, there's the obvious. My children, my marriage, my family. So that obviously is number one. And the intentionality that we've been raising our kids. But the book, I mean, it is, I resigned from my job to write a book. And so what that means is sort of like being self-employed, where you peel yourself out of bed to sit at a desk and just plug away. Yeah. And you have no idea if it's going to go anywhere. Is anybody going to like this book? Is this going to be a huge waste of time? Yeah. When I quit my job, my husband absorbed my lost salary. So, which wasn't a high salary, but it was still, any money is money. He absorbed that. And so I'm like, is this going to go anywhere? Is this going to be a huge waste of time and money? And so lots of self-doubt. So overcoming that and sitting down at the desk one more day and doing the work. Yeah. So I'm proud that I did that, and I'm proud that it bore fruit. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the time. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the In Good Company podcast, where we believe that the best parts in business happen in good company. Take care. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you.